Hey folks, Woodgeist here again, doing another video on a knife I made. Let's jump into it. Here it is. Camp chopper. Not a huge camp chopper. They can be much bigger. I think this is 16 inches overall, something like that. So it's sizable. It'll do a lot of cutting tasks. I made it out of 3/16 01 tool steel. This is butterscotch micarta from knifekits.com. These are Corby rivets. They're a screw together rivet. I think they're the Corby ones. If you've never tried them, I suggest giving them a go. They cost, I don't know, $2 a piece, so it is more expensive than pin stock, but they are going to make it easier to glue up. They're going to give you the ability to screw together non-permanently before your final glue up. So you can screw them on to your handle, do a little bit of rough profiling. You can screw them together and get your even top of your handle. I don't know what you call that. So yeah, they're worthwhile. So any of these bolt fasteners, there's like the tactical fasteners, loveless bolts. Give something like that a try. Maybe you won't like it. Maybe you prefer pin stock. Maybe you actually know how to peen a rivet. I don't. Whenever I try, I just make a mess. So if you're comfortable with that, stick with it. But if you are not comfortable with that, if you're finding the results aren't great, try a Corby or a loveless rivet. It might make your knife making a lot easier. A couple of the features, I did a hidden lanyard hole. Just gouged that stuff out with a sanding drum. It's not perfectly even, but it does the job. I went with a handle that I could do a lower grip on, and a nice big choil for protection. The balance is actually quite nice. It's quite near the end of the handle, so it's pretty lively, which I guess is more of a concern for fighting, but it also gives you the ability to do finer cutting tasks, and then you can reach back and do bigger chops. Let's see what else to talk about. Using 01 tool steel, I had a pretty limited width, which is something stock removal knife makers, you're going to come across it. So I had 2-inch stock, and I couldn't get enough curve out of the handle, or I couldn't get as much as I wanted. So what I actually did was use my forge and anvil and hammer, and hammered in a little more curvature into the handle. So if you've been doing knife making for a while, stock removal, you don't have to go full on blacksmith to get some great advantages out of a forge and anvil. You can get things out of your knife that you wouldn't be able to get without it. One thing I'm keeping in mind is if I want to build a kukri design, I'm pretty limited in how much forward curve I can put on the blade as a stock removal knife maker, buying 2-inch or 3-inch wide pieces. But if I put some time and effort into putting a bend into it, I can get that out of a smaller piece of metal. So consider it. Another thing to consider is a hand filing jig. My grinder broke recently, so I went without doing any knife making for a while, which sucked. But eventually I made a hand filing jig, and I'll put a link in the description to Aaron Goff's video on how to make and how to use one. He's where I got the idea from. It's a great way to get into knife making without spending a fortune. If your grinder's on the fritz, it's a good option to have. It doesn't take material off as fast, so it's slower, but you also have the ability to be careful with how much material you're taking off. It takes a long time to do a flat grind on 3/16 inch 01. So I did I went down to about 50 thousandths on the tip, and I got frustrated and said, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. And so I went out and I bought this. Another tip for starter knife makers or hobby knife makers. This is a sanding pad for Auto Buddy. It hooks up to a drill. This was $5 at Princess Auto. The adhesive discs are you get 5 for $5 in a pack or whatever. But the advantage of this in terms of doing convex grind is that it's made out of a foam. It's plastic here, and it's not going to bend in half or anything. It's pretty sturdy, but there's enough give in it that when you press your blade stock into it, it's going to curve and give you a convex grind. One thing to keep in mind, you can see some cuts into the foam there. As you're getting closer to, or as your edge is getting thinner, it's easier to dig in. So what you want to make sure to do is have it rotate away from your cutting edge where you're pressing in. So that meant for me setting it reverse to do this side and forward to do this side. So a trick, keep it in mind, keep it in your pocket. Maybe you'll use it, maybe you won't. But as for that filing jig, if you do Scandi grind, it's actually pretty quick. I did a 4-inch knife in, I don't know, half hour, 40 minutes doing just a Scandi grind. And it depends on the kind of file you have, how coarse it is. But finally, I want to do a little public service announcement. I was cutting, pretend this is a piece of birch wood lumber. I was holding it against the bench and doing some chop tests with a new knife. And I went chop, chop, and it went well. And then I went like this, and you know the problem. It didn't bite in until it reached my hand. Oh, bleeding again. So I had to spend half of my day in the emergency room waiting to get stitches. So people talk about you should be careful. I mean, of course you should be careful. We're not stupid, right? But the people talk about the big scary risks. You could lose your finger, you could cut a tendon, you could get a blood infection and die. These are the big scary ones, and they're not as realistic to people who have never had that happen or known someone who's had that happen. So don't ignore those things, but also keep in mind that when you get a cut like this, you might not be able to do the things you like to do for a while. It's going to be a few days before I can really grip something well. It hurts to squeeze. It's hard to do. I tried to do some leather work, but I had to just repurpose this sheath, and it fits okay. But I'd like to do a new sheath for this knife. I'm not going to be able to for a couple days, and it sucks because it's the weekend for me now. And so there goes that opportunity. That was my foot. And, yes, there is the risk of infection and serious damage to nerves and stuff. But realistically, if you clean it and then go get it taken care of, that's not going to be a problem. What is going to be a problem is that you're not going to be able to use this hand as easily. And for me, it's mostly an issue with my hobbies. I can't do leather knife making, play guitar, stuff like that right now. But for some people, it's going to be an issue with your job. You might not be able to work at full capacity. And if you do this off the job, they're probably not going to be very impressed. If you do it on the job, make sure to report it as an on-the-job injury. But, so yeah, I just want to say, don't be careless. Knives are great because they can cut, but they're not great when they cut you. And the less you hurt yourself, the more knives you can make. So yeah, I'll just give you some final looks. I think I'm going to come back and do a little more finishing on the handle. I'm not happy with those little gouges, whatever they are. Go back to a coarser grit, take those out. I did a little bit of a taper or swell, but I kept it pretty thick overall. Yeah,